In this video, I am going to tackle the subject of working in the Philippines as an expat resident or a tourist. So stay tuned. Hi guys, I hope you guys are doing well out there. I'm doing pretty well myself. Anyway, I was noticing on some videos, some comments from people talking about, people that live in, especially expats, people living in the Philippines should be paying taxes on, the money that they make from YouTube, and what they're doing is illegal. And so, questions arose about the legality of working while in the Philippines as an expat. And it came across my head to make a video about it because I'm going to be semi-retired when I move to the Philippines. So I won't be getting a pension because I'm not fully retired. In America, it's 62 to retire early. I believe regular is 65 and late is 67 or maybe 70, or maybe I have it off. Maybe somebody can tell me in the comments below. Anyway, semi-retired, so I still need income um, for living in the Philippines. And I started thinking about the legalities of it, and I looked up the information about it, about what is legal to do in the Philippines based on, the research I did for it. And I will put links to the descriptions of the research I did, and it's based on the Bureau of Internal Revenue in the Philippines, that website. So straight from the sources, and also from the tax accounting of the Philippines website, which is in the Philippines. And so those two sources I use when I research this video. And I'm actually going to be going online and showing you exactly what it says when it comes to working in the Philippines, making income, and specifically paying taxes. So yeah, let's jump into it. I don't want to do anything illegal in the Philippines, as I'm sure you don't, or people who are there now doesn't. So that's why I'm making this video. So let's jump into it. I have the websites pulled out, and I will show you what it says. And oh, I also wanted to say this before we get into this. I am not a CPA. I am not a certified public accountant that handles income taxes or anything like that. I'm not a lawyer. This is just research that I did on my own. This is just my personal opinion and my interpretation of it. I'm showing you what I have learned, but if you take that into your own circumstances, and if you need a lawyer or a CPA, please contact one, because I am neither. So now that is out of the way, that short disclaimer is out of the way, let's jump into it. I'll make myself smaller and I'll show you what I found. So let me make myself smaller. All right, here we go. First up, this is the Republic of the Philippines Bureau of Internal Revenue. So this is the website, bir.gov.ph. There will be a link down in the description again, so you can check it out yourself. So if you look, it says who's required to file income tax returns. It has a lot of information on here. So let's just scroll down and look at who's required to file income tax returns. Individuals, so like me and you. So they have individuals, and they also have about corporations and stuff like that, and the documents they need. But anyway, let's look at this, individuals. So it says resident citizens receiving income from sources within or outside the Philippines. Resident citizens, income from sources within or outside the Philippines. So if you are a resident citizen working within the Philippines and getting income, or you are getting income from outside the Philippines, from another country or online or any other source of income that's not in the Philippines and you're a resident, you are required to file income tax returns. If you're not filing income tax returns, then that's illegal. They have some examples like employees driving purely compensation income from 2 or more employers, employees driving purely compensation income regardless to the amount, single to several employers. So the self-employed individuals, so if you're self-employed, if you're working for somebody, mixed through your business or your professional practice, non-business, non-professionals, individuals receiving purely compensation from a single employer. So whether it's from an employer, a single employer, multiple employers, mixed, whether it's within the Philippines or outside the Philippines, you're required to report income tax as a resident citizen. Now let's scroll down a little bit more. So it says non-resident citizens receiving income sources from within the Philippines. So if you're not a resident citizen, so you're not a resident of the Philippines, but you're a non-resident citizen residing in the Philippines and you're making income from within the Philippines. So let's say you're working for a school or something in the Philippines as an English teacher, then you're required to report income tax. I'm assuming most schools do that for you anyway, but anyway, it's required to report it if it's coming within the Philippines. Aliens, whether resident or not, receiving income from sources within the Philippines. So the big question here is resident alien or non-resident alien. So I got this information from the Income Tax Accounting Center, which is tax accounting, ACCTG center.ph. So this is directly in the Philippines. Income tax classification of expatriates in the Philippines, so expats in the Philippines, their classification. Non-resident aliens, expats in the Philippines. So a non-resident expat, alien expat in the Philippines is one who's not a citizen of the Philippines and who is not a resident of the Philippines, but deriving income as an employee in the Philippines. Is either he is classified either as a non-resident alien not engaged in trade or business or engaged in trade or business. And the determining factor is the length of presence in the Philippines. A non-resident alien who stayed more than 180 days during any calendar year shall be deemed a non-resident alien doing business in the Philippines. So any calendar year covers all the months in the year covered by the period of assignment. The expat in the Philippines. So let's think about this. So if you're not a resident, if you're not a citizen, right, and you're not a resident, so to me that is like, okay, you're not Filipino, you are not a resident, so you don't have permanent residence, like you're not a SRRB visa holder, right? But you are getting compensation in the Philippines from work. You're engaged in business. So let's say you are a teacher teaching English. You got a contract to be in the Philippines. Now, if you are in the Philippines for more than 180 days, you're classified as a non-resident alien. So if you have more than like a 6-month contract at an English school and you're staying in the Philippines, then you're classified as a non-resident alien, right? And so if it's more than 180 days, then the tax, well, you're classified as a non-resident alien anyway. How much tax you pay are either less than 180 days or more than 180 days. More than 180 days, so it says it's 25% withholding tax on gross compensation for and 5 to 32% of compensation, personal exemptions for if it's more than 180 days. Less than 180 days, 25%. More than that, 5 to 32%. After deductions for personal exemptions, 50,000 for basic personal, 25,000. Da 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 da. Anyway, basically the way I look as non-resident aliens is people who are there in the Philippines on contracts working for somebody else. They are not living there as residents, right? They don't have a SRIB visa. They don't have a spouse visa living as a resident. They are non-resident. Um, and so those people, non-residents, like I said here, right? Um, uh, non-residents within the Philippines, right? So if you're like an English teacher in the Philippines for 6 months or more, then you have to pay tax. Now, let's talk about, uh, so if you're a resident citizen, like a Filipino, right, or an SRRB holder that has taken up residence, you're supposed to pay tax within or outside the Philippines. Um, like if you're a Filipino in a YouTube, making income from YouTube, which is outside the Philippines, right? And you should be paying tax on the money you make with YouTube. Now, if you're a spouse and working, and you get money as an English teacher in the Philippines or something, then you need to pay tax, income tax. If you get money, derive money from, like YouTube, like income from YouTube, which is outside the Philippines, as a resident of the Philippines, you're supposed to be paying income tax on that source of income. So now, so non-residence is only within the Philippines, right? So if you were there less than, if you're there as a non-resident, you don't have a residence. If you're not considered a resident citizen, then it's only within the Philippines, not outside the Philippines. Now the question is, how long is it considered to be a non-resident? So non-resident in Philippines. So you can, like I'm doing here, you can Google it. I actually found this before. It says, an alien who stays in the Philippines for less than 2 years is considered a non-resident alien. So, less than 2 years. So, if you're on a contract like an English teacher, and it's less, yeah, it's 106-month contract, then you're going to be paying less tax. If it's more than 180 days, more than 6 months, you're going to be paying more tax, and you're going to be doing that for 2 years. Now, let's say you're teaching English in the Philippines and it's been more than 2 years. Then, in that case, you're going to be defined as taking up residence in the Philippines. And then, as a resident citizen, let's say you're working in the Philippines and getting YouTube money too. As a resident, then you need to pay tax on both of that. So if it's less than 2 years, you don't. If it's more than 2 years, then you do. Now, I talked about, like English teachers on work visas. I also talked about like spouses that would qualify under that circumstance if they're there less than 2 years, more than 2 years. So anyway, we have covered individuals, resident citizens. So if you reside in, if you have a visa to stay in the Philippines, you have to pay income tax on what you make in the Philippines or outside the Philippines. So that's resident. We defined what a resident citizen is, what a non-resident citizen is. So after 2 years, then you're considered a resident citizen. If it's less than that, you're considered a non-resident citizen. receiving income from within the Philippines. It also says aliens, whether resident or not, receiving income from sources within the Philippines. So if you are an alien, and let's say you are on, you know, you are on a, you're not a, you don't plan on permanently residing there. You haven't took up residence there, um, and so you're there working. You get some job within the Philippines, but you plan on going, home. Then whatever income from within the Philippines, if it's from within the Philippines, then you have to pay income tax on that. Um, so now, let's talk about tourists, like on people going on a tourist visa. Now, if you are on a tourist visa, then you are not a resident citizen, right? You're not a non-resident citizen. You're considered just an alien in the Philippines on a tourist visa, and so um, you are not supposed to make income on a tourist visa within the Philippines. Um, yeah, well, this is kind of tricky. It says aliens, whether resident or not, receiving income from sources within the Philippines. So, if you are making income online, like through YouTube or something, as a tourist, and the money is not coming from within the Philippines. If you're making online like affiliate marketing, or if you're making online through stock market or something like that, uh, as a tourist, then there's no reason to pay income tax in the Philippines. The problem arises when you take up residence in the Philippines, right? So that's when you have to pay both within or outside. You have to report it within or outside, both incomes within or outside. But they do have tax exemption status and stuff like that. You can look into it more, so you're not double taxed. They have with other countries. They have agreements with other countries, so about double taxation and stuff like that. You can look into it deeper. But basically, for paying money that you receive, if you took up if you're a resident citizen, um, Filipino, or if you have took up residence in the Philippines for more than 2 years, if you're on the SRRB visa, it's assuming that you're going to stay there. You're taking up residence there. Um, then you need to report it within or outside the Philippines. So I hope that clears things up. I just want to go over it one more time now that I'm bigger, just my thoughts behind it. So if you go to the Philippines, and your purpose is to reside in the Philippines, for work, like as an English teacher, you got a job as an English teacher in the Philippines, then you would be considered a non-resident alien. And as a non-alien resident, then you need to pay taxes on income you get within the Philippines. Now, if you're a resident, like you're a Filipino, or you've taken up residence like an SRRB visa holder, or if you're a resident like as a spouse in the Philippines, then residents need to report both income within the Philippines and outside the Philippines as worldwide income. So if you're making income outside the Philippines on YouTube or through some other sources, like I mentioned before, working online, affiliate marketing, making money through the stock market, on an SRRB visa, then you need to report that income. Now, if you're a tourist, you're just a plain alien, then you only need to report money if you make money within the Philippines. And you're not supposed to be working in the Philippines anyway on a tourist visa. And so there's no reason to report income that's made, on that type. So you have a visa free as a tourist, but after that, then you have you have to get the visa that allows you to stay. So then, if it's less than 100, then you're like a non-resident alien. So if you make money within the Philippines, you need to report it. And then if you are more than 180 days, then you're going to be paying less income tax, more benefits. But if that's 180 days. So that's like, I think many people leave after 180 days to avoid that tax thing. Again, I'm not going to say anything about that because I'm not a CPA or a lawyer. But if it's outside the Philippines, like if you're just a tourist and you're working online like you normally do from home, then you don't need to report that income tax anyway, right? So that's the way I look at it. I hope I got it right. I hope you find this information useful. Maybe I made some mistakes, but again, I'm not a CPA. I'm not a lawyer. This is just my opinion. Let me know what you think about this. If it's helped you out, hit the like button. If you have any questions or comments, then leave them down below and I will try to answer them. My next video is going to be about what I'm going to be doing in the Philippines to actually earn income. And so it's not working within the Philippines, obviously. It's income from other sources, not within the Philippines. But I plan on going on the tourist visa, so no reason to pay tax on money that I'm getting. It's not coming in the Philippines. I won't have a bank in the Philippines. All the money will be deposited into banks outside the Philippines. I'll get into more of that later once I start making the video. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you in another video.